My name is Jim Bowen. I've been a member of this church since 1994. My wife Jane and I moved up from Houston after I retired from MD Anderson Cancer Center in the late summer of 1994. We've lived in Austin ever since and have been attending this church ever since. It's been a wonderful experience for us in very many ways. I'm a hopelessly addictive school teacher. Therefore, having the opportunity to teach a Sunday school class has been both a privilege and a need for me. I was raised in a small North Texas town in a church that proudly called itself Hard Shell Baptist. It was one of those churches where we felt that unfortunately everybody else in town was not going to be with us in heaven. But when I went to college, after I graduated from high school in 1951, by a series of coincidences, I ended up taking square dancing in lieu of a physical education class. And at some point during that, I developed a deep and abiding love for square dancing. And at one point, one of my relatives, members of my home church in Jacksboro, told me that dancing was dancing and I needed to get permission from my minister about that. And so I spoke not to my minister, but to a minister of a Baptist church in Wichita Falls, where I was in college, told him my story, and his response was that I had to choose between square dancing and the church. And I chose square dancing. And I have to be honest and say that I have no regrets about that. While I was still in college, I met my first wife. But within a relatively short time after our marriage, she was diagnosed with cancer. And after about 2.5 years, that cancer took her life. And at her funeral, someone that I didn't know walked up to me and said, "Be at peace, young man, this was God's will." But that statement, with all of its wonderfully good intentions, had just the opposite effect on me. Instead of being accepting, it made me extremely angry. And my question was, what kind of God would will something like the death of a young person? And I decided that I didn't really want much to do with that God, and so I quit the church. I quit all churches. Well, fast forward a little while to college at Oregon State University in Corvallis, and I was dealing still with the sadness of my first wife's loss, with the debts that we had incurred during our treatment and all those things. But I decided at one point that I needed an outlet, and discovered that there was a municipal league softball program, and that the local Methodist church was assembling a team. And they needed a first baseman. And this is where one of life's great coincidences entered my story. I had a first baseman's mitt. And so I went down and talked to the coach about being on the team. I told him I was not a member of the church, not interested in becoming a member of the church, but I was interested in playing softball, and had my own first baseman's mitt. And he said, okay, we'll let you try out. Well, it was a wonderful summer. I had a really good time playing softball. I really liked these guys. And at some point during the time, the coach said, you know, after each practice and after each game, we go in to the fellowship hall and we have a discussion about how the game went, and we have refreshments, and sometimes we have a little devotional, he called it. As I've already told you, I have no interest in going to church. And he said, not to worry. He said, you don't have to go in through the front doors. The fellowship hall is through a side door. So we're going to go in through the side door and we're going to have fellowship. And then they had something that I had never heard of in my entire life called Laity Sunday. And I thought, oh my goodness, what is that? Well, one of the things it was that the whole team wanted to sit together in a regular church service, entering through the front doors as a team, sitting down and being recognized as their church's softball league. Not that we had won, but that we had played. And so I think that was my first experience at going through the front door of a Methodist church. And it was such a good feeling. It just seemed so right to me because this little church had such a sense of community. And they were non-judgmental. They didn't even believe that hard-shell Baptists were going to hell, My dad's youngest brother was a part of the so-called Lost Battalion in World War II. He was on Java when Java fell. He ultimately died in a Japanese prison camp. And when the word finally came through that Uncle Glenn had died, I can remember the family gathering. My granddad, who never ever lost his faith in God, never ever. He said something that I wish I could have remembered earlier on in my own situation, but it came to me much later and it was so important. He said, God never promised us that we wouldn't have trouble. He just promised us that we wouldn't have to bear them by ourselves. Looking back on my own lucky, happy life, that is so true. But sometimes you can only appreciate that by looking back on it, not while it's happening. And the well-meaning lady who offended me so deeply by saying that Ray's death was God's will, now I can look back on that and say, I don't think that God wanted a lovely young person to die. But now I understand that God did not abandon me in that event, although sadly the reverse was not true. We've had an absolutely amazing, blessed life, I think. And thank you for listening to this long-winded narrative.